They laughed in my face, literally laughed, when I asked for that clause in my contract. 2 months later, that same clause made me a millionaire. I'm Emma Lawson, 32 years old, and until last spring, I thought loyalty still meant something in corporate America. I was a senior marketing strategist at Vexler Media, a sleek, downtown firm that lived on buzzwords and backstabbing. My boss, Damon Clark, was the kind of man who made Betrayal look elegant. Polished suits, charming smiles, and a mind that never stopped calculating. When I joined Vexler 5 years ago, Damon had been my mentor, the kind who called you kiddo in meetings and told you that you had potential. He'd built me up, piece by piece, until I felt like I owed him everything. But the higher I climbed, the more I realized the truth. At Vexler, success was rented. And Damon owned the keys. It started as admiration. Damon had this magnetic confidence. He could sell fire to a forest. He dropped phrases like, "We're a family here," and everyone would eat it up. But behind the smiles, there were whispers, rumors of people who, mysteriously, got replaced once they stopped being useful. I brushed them off. I thought I was different. Then came the contract. It was supposed to be a formality, a renewal for my promotion to senior strategist. HR sent me the draft, and I noticed something odd. The non-compete clause was brutal. It meant if I ever left Vexler, I couldn't work in the same industry for 2 years. That's career suicide for someone like me. So, I did what I always do. I read every word, every comma. And that's when I saw it, a small line in the termination compensation section. A line that basically said, if the employee is terminated without cause, full annual compensation shall be paid for the remaining contract term. But without cause wasn't defined. I knew it was a legal loophole, a dangerous one. But I also knew Damon. He was impulsive, proud, and allergic to people who challenged his control. So, I made a deal. When I brought the contract back to HR, I asked for one addition, a clarification. I wanted the definition of without cause to include any restructuring, leadership change, or position redundancy. Basically, if they ever reorganized and pushed me out, they'd still owe me everything. HR blinked, then laughed. Emma, my HR rep giggled, "You know how these contracts go. We don't fire people without cause." Even Damon chuckled when he saw it. "You've got guts," he said, leaning back in his chair. "But come on, kiddo, this isn't Wall Street. We're not riding golden parachutes." I smiled politely. "It's just peace of mind," I said. He grinned, that shark grin I'd learned to fear later. "Fine. If it makes you sleep better at night." They signed it. All of them. Without realizing they'd just handed me my weapon. For a while, everything felt perfect. I worked harder than ever, leading campaigns that brought in millions. Damon praised me in every meeting. He'd slap my back, call me his secret weapon, and tell everyone I was the future of Vexler. But success changes people, and it doesn't take long for envy to follow. The shift was subtle at first. A few missed meetings. A few forgotten emails. Then suddenly, my name disappeared from the company's biggest pitch presentation. When I asked about it, Damon's assistant gave me a tight smile. "Oh, that was a leadership decision." I laughed it off. Maybe it was a mix-up. Maybe I was overthinking it. But the next week, I saw something that froze me. Damon presenting my campaign, my words, my visuals, to a boardroom full of clients, taking every ounce of credit. And when our eyes met through the glass, he didn't even flinch. He just kept smiling. Something in me cracked that day. That night, as I sat in my car staring at the city lights, my mind replayed every warning sign, every laugh, every compliment that suddenly felt like manipulation in disguise. Still, I told myself it wasn't what it looked like. Damon had always looked out for me. He said we were a team. But deep down, a quiet unease began to hum beneath my skin. A voice whispering, "He's setting you up." I tried to drown it out. I told myself to stay loyal, to trust the man who'd built my career. But as the weeks passed, I could feel the air changing around me, colleagues avoiding eye contact, Meetings held without me, whispers dying when I entered the room. Something was coming. I could feel it in my bones. And the scariest part? I still wanted to believe I was safe. Because betrayal doesn't hit all at once. It seeps in softly, silently, until the laughter that once felt harmless starts to echo like a warning. And soon, I'd find out just how expensive their laughter would become. It started with silence. Not the kind that's peaceful, the kind that makes your stomach twist. Damon stopped calling me kiddo. Just like that. One morning I walked into the office, coffee in hand, ready to brief him on the upcoming campaign, and he barely looked up from his laptop. "Just leave the file," he said. No smile. No eye contact. Just distance. At first, I told myself he was stressed. The company was pushing for expansion, and Damon had been juggling too many accounts. But that silence didn't fade. It spread from Damon to the entire floor. People I used to brainstorm with now kept conversations short. My ideas went from being brilliant to a little off-brand. Still, I tried to shake it off. Maybe I was just imagining things. Maybe I was overanalyzing. But then came the meeting that confirmed everything my gut already knew. It was a Friday morning, the kind when the office buzzed with that pre-weekend energy. Damon called the senior staff for a strategy session. I'd been leading the analytics for our new luxury brand campaign for weeks, and it was supposed to be my presentation. When I walked in, the lights were dimmed, the projector was already running, and someone else was standing at the front of the room. Maya. She was new, a junior strategist who'd joined 3 months ago. Smart, ambitious, but still learning the ropes. Or at least, that's what I thought. As I slid into my seat, she clicked to the first slide. And my heart nearly stopped. It was my presentation. My structure, my layout, even my phrasing. I knew it word for word. She didn't just use my work, she memorized it. I glanced at Damon. He caught my eye and gave the faintest smile, the kind people wear when they've already decided how the story ends. When Maya finished, the room erupted in applause. Damon stood and said, "Fantastic work, Maya. Exactly the kind of fresh thinking we need." My throat went dry. I waited for him to say something, anything, that acknowledged I'd been the one leading this project. But he didn't. After the meeting, I followed him into the hallway. "That was my campaign," I said quietly. "My analytics, my pitch structure." He turned to me, calm as ever. "Emma," he interrupted, "we're a team. Ideas evolve. You don't own creativity." I froze. "So she just takes it?" He sighed like I was being dramatic. "You're overreacting. Don't make this emotional. You've always been good at mentoring. Think of this as passing the torch." That's when I felt it, the subtle chill in his tone, the careful phrasing meant to make me doubt myself. "Don't make this emotional." He'd said it so gently, yet it cut deeper than if he'd shouted. I walked away, but something inside me cracked. Over the next few weeks, the distance grew. Damon started holding informal, brainstorming sessions that I somehow never got invited to. He began copying Maya on private emails that used to go only to me. I'd walk past his glass office and see them laughing, her leaning over his desk, his hand gesturing animatedly like he'd found his new prodigy. But the real blow came at the quarterly performance review. I sat across from Damon, trying to steady my voice as he flipped through my file. "You've been solid this quarter," he said, eyes never meeting mine, "but there's concern about your adaptability. Leadership's looking for people who can handle change more fluidly." I blinked. "Concern? Based on what?" He closed the file and folded his hands. "You've been resistant lately. Defensive in meetings. It's not about your work, it's about perception." That word. Perception. It's what people use when they can't accuse you of anything real. For a long moment, I just sat there, staring at him, trying to read the truth behind his calm expression. Was this the same man who used to tell me I was the best strategist he'd ever hired? I wanted to fight back, to call out the lies, but all I could manage was a quiet, "I understand." He smiled softly. "Good. Keep your head down, Emma. Let me handle the politics." That night, I sat in my apartment, staring at my reflection in the dark window. My mind replayed every red flag, the missing emails, the cold tone, the stolen credit, the gaslighting hidden beneath politeness. And yet, part of me still refused to believe Damon would betray me. He'd built my career. He defended me in rooms I wasn't even in. There had to be a reason. Maybe upper management was pushing him. Maybe he was protecting me. But another part of me, the quieter, sharper part, whispered something else. He's not protecting you. He's replacing you. I tried to silence it. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. But denial is a powerful drug, and I was addicted to the belief that loyalty still mattered. I didn't know it then, but Damon had already written the final chapter of my career at Vexler, and while I was busy doubting myself, he was busy setting the trap. They say betrayal doesn't happen in one moment, it unfolds in whispers. But mine came with an email. A single, emotionless message that shattered 5 years of loyalty. Emma, please report to the conference room at 9 a.m. HR and management will be present. That was it. No subject line, no explanation. Just silence before the execution. I didn't sleep that night. Every scenario ran through my head. Maybe it was restructuring. Maybe a client complaint. Maybe Damon had a plan I didn't understand yet. Because some part of me, the naive, loyal part, still believed he wouldn't do this. When I walked into that room the next morning, the air was thick enough to choke on. Damon sat at the head of the table, calm as ever, while the HR director avoided my eyes. Maya sat in the corner, not as a peer, but as a witness. Damon started speaking before I even sat down. Emma, he said, voice smooth as glass, you've been an incredible asset to this company. But after reviewing our long-term goals, leadership has decided to move in a new direction. New direction. The phrase corporate killers use when they don't want to say you're finished. I stared at him. A new direction? My voice cracked. After everything I've built here? He gave a sympathetic nod, rehearsed to perfection. It's not personal. We're restructuring. Your position will be made redundant. HR will walk you through the details. Maya looked down. She couldn't even meet my gaze. It hit me then, redundant. The exact word I'd added to my contract clause. I felt my pulse spike. Redundant. I repeated slowly. Damon, you signed that clause. You know what it means. For the first time, his expression faltered, just slightly. Yes, he said carefully, we're aware of the clause. But we've reviewed it with legal, and we believe this qualifies as a performance-based adjustment, not redundancy. My heart sank. He'd found a loophole, or so he thought. You're lying, I said, my voice trembling but steady. You can't twist the wording like that. You know I've hit every target, every KPI, every goal. This isn't performance, it's personal. His smile didn't waver. Emma, don't do this. Let's make this easy for both of us. Easy. That word snapped something in me. You stole my work, I whispered. You gave it to Maya. You erased me from every campaign. And now you're calling me redundant. His silence was louder than any confession. And then the final blow. Maya's voice, small and shaking. I didn't know she wasn't part of the new team. New team. I turned to Damon. You replaced me, I said. You're replacing me with her. He exhaled softly, like I was being dramatic again. Business evolves, Emma. Don't make this emotional. That phrase again. The dagger dressed as advice. Something inside me went numb. My ears rang as HR started explaining severance and next steps. Words blurred together, release agreement, final paycheck, non-compete. Then I heard it, termination without cause. It was buried in the paperwork, almost unnoticed. But it was exactly what my clause covered. I looked up at Damon. He was already standing, already done with me. But there was a flicker of unease in his eyes, like he'd realized too late what he'd just signed. I didn't say a word. I just stood, gathered my things, and walked out. The hallway felt endless. Every step echoed with humiliation, disbelief, rage. Coworkers glanced at me, some looked away, others whispered. I'd been their success story, their proof that hard work paid off. Now I was a ghost walking out of my own legacy. By the time I reached my car, the first tear fell. Then another. And then I broke. I slammed the steering wheel, screaming into the silence, 5 years of loyalty, devotion, and faith unraveling in one morning. I thought of every late night, every time I defended Damon, every weekend I worked just to prove myself. And now? I was nothing but a footnote in his rise. For hours, I sat there, crying until there was nothing left. No pride, no hope, just exhaustion. But when the tears finally stopped, something else settled in. Not rage. Not despair. Clarity. I opened my laptop, scrolled through my old contract, and reread every line. My hands shook when I reached the section, "Termination without cause shall include any restructuring, leadership change, or position redundancy." Every word I had fought for was there. In black and white. Signed. Stamped. Untouched. They'd laughed when I added it. They'd mocked me for being too cautious. And now that same clause, that little joke, was about to become my revenge. As I closed my laptop, a strange calm washed over me. Because I realized something Damon never would: you can't destroy someone who's already read the fine print. He thought he'd ended my career. But what he really did was finance my freedom. And for the first time that day, I smiled. Not with bitterness. With quiet, calculated satisfaction. I woke up the next morning feeling like a ghost, empty, detached, numb. It's strange how fast your life can collapse. One day, you're leading campaigns and shaking hands with executives. The next, you're staring at a ceiling you paid for with overtime and loyalty, wondering what the hell just happened. The emails had already started flooding in. "We're so sorry to hear the news. You'll bounce back soon." Every message was polite and hollow. The kind people send when they're afraid your bad luck might be contagious. I sat on my couch, laptop open, scrolling through the same contract that had cost me sleep months ago. My eyes stopped at that sentence again. "Termination without cause shall include any restructuring, leadership change, or position redundancy." I whispered the words aloud, slowly this time, like a prayer. That's when it hit me. Damon hadn't beaten me. He'd underestimated me. For years, I'd played the obedient strategist, the woman who smiled, stayed late, and never questioned authority. But behind every "yes, Damon," I'd been learning, watching, recording. And now, every lesson he taught me about manipulation, I was about to return, with interest. But before I could rise, I had to fall all the way down. That night, I met my best friend Lisa at a small bar near the river. She'd worked at another firm and always warned me about Damon. "He's the kind of man who'll shake your hand while loosening the floor beneath you," she used to say. When she saw me walk in, mascara smudged and eyes swollen, she didn't say a word, just slid a whiskey toward me. I told her everything: the meeting, the fake sympathy, the clause. When I finished, she leaned back, whistled softly, and said, "You do realize, they just signed their own financial death warrant, right?" I stared at her, unsure if I should laugh or cry. "I don't even know where to start." She smiled, the kind that says, "I believe in you even when you don't." "You start," she said, "by remembering who the hell you are. You didn't survive 5 years in that Shark Tank by accident." Something about those words cracked the fog in my mind. Because she was right, I wasn't weak. I'd just been conditioned to think I needed someone like Damon to succeed. That was the night I stopped being the victim. Over the next week, I pulled myself together piece by piece. Step 1. Lawyer up. I hired a quiet, sharp-witted attorney named Julian Reed, the kind of man who read contracts like poetry. When I showed him mine, his eyebrows shot up. "Who drafted this?" he asked. "I did," I said. He smiled, a real one this time. "Then they're in trouble. This clause is airtight. They owe you for every month left in your contract, plus penalties if they don't pay within 30 days. A rush of power surged through me. "So, I can fight back?" "Oh, Emma," he said, leaning forward, "you're not fighting back. You're collecting." For the first time in weeks, I felt alive. But something deeper than revenge started growing inside me, something stronger. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about self-respect. All those years I'd waited for validation, approval, acknowledgement from Damon, from the company, from anyone. I realized I'd been giving my power away. They had fired me to silence me. But they'd done the one thing that set me free. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and wrote a letter. Not an angry one, not yet. Just a simple, precise demand for payment, citing the clause, the signature, and the termination notice. Then I printed it, signed it, and slipped it into an envelope. My hand didn't even shake. As I sealed it, I whispered, "You taught me how to play, Damon. Now watch me win." Over the next few days, I started rebuilding my rhythm. I cleaned my apartment, updated my portfolio, even started sketching out a business idea, a boutique strategy firm that treated people the way I never was. Every small step felt like reclaiming a piece of myself they'd tried to erase. The pain was still there, the humiliation, the betrayal, but it had changed shape. It wasn't crushing anymore. It was fuel. I realized something crucial. No one was coming to save me. Not HR, not friends, not anyone. And that's exactly why I had to save myself. So, I stopped checking my phone for apologies that would never come. I stopped replaying that conference room scene in my head. And I started focusing on one thing: justice. Quiet, methodical, and absolute. Because the truth was simple. They thought firing me ended the story. They had no idea it had just begun. And as I watched the city lights flicker outside my window that night, I smiled, not with anger, but with purpose. Damon had taught me everything about power. Now, I was going to teach him what happens when you hand it to the wrong woman. They thought I'd cry and crawl away. Instead, I drew a map of their secrets. Every plan I made started with one cold fact: they'd underestimated me. While Damon polished his image, I became invisible, the perfect cover for gathering the one thing that could topple him: proof. First, I turned the tools of my old life into weapons. I dug through every folder on my laptop, every cloud backup, every Slack thread I'd ever sent. If they'd taken credit for my work, traces of me would be left behind: timestamps, draft file names, offhand comments in design notes. I printed them all. Each timestamp was a bell, each draft name a fingerprint. I organized them into a neat stack that felt like a small, righteous arsenal. Next, I rebuilt the social map of the office. People love to talk when they think no one's listening, especially about their little victories. I reached out privately to a handful of former colleagues I trusted more than I'd admitted. I didn't ask for heroic confessions. I asked for details, dates, who was in which room, who'd praised what in emails. I learned who resented Damon's favorites and who feared him enough to stay silent. Those murmurs became threads I could pull. Then I used Julian, my lawyer, not as a gladiator, but as a strategist. He drafted the first letter demanding payment and quietly filed a notice that we expected full compliance under the clause. But Julian also opened another door: subpoena power. He told me to keep every copy of every communication, because a legal paper trail could turn a he-said-she-said into an airtight case. He loved details the way I loved campaigns, and together we began building a timeline that would make their laughter sound criminal on paper. But law alone wasn't enough. I needed Damon to crack publicly, or at least show his hand. So I set emotional bait: subtle, human, impossible to pin as manipulation unless you were looking for it. I started by reconnecting with clients I'd helped bring in. Nothing aggressive: a handwritten note here, a celebratory message there, a polite checking in that reminded them whose strategy had made their brand sing. Those small reminders sounded harmless, but they seeded questions in the right minds. Who built this? Who lost her job and why? I also used Maya, indirectly. I didn't corner her, I invited her. I sent a neutral, warm email: coffee? I owe you a tour of the city. She responded out of politeness, perhaps guilt. Over the next few meetings, I let her talk. Young people who've been lifted over another's shoulders often reveal the scaffolding. She mentioned dates, awkward handoffs, the names Damon used in private praise. Each offhand comment was a new notch. I kept my face soft, my responses encouraging, like a therapist mining memories. She didn't know she was giving me the keys. Surveillance became a game of patience. I discreetly collected public records, filings, client lists, press releases that failed to credit my campaigns. I tracked the cadence of Damon's public appearances and social posts, and I saved them. A leadership talk here, a team success post there, all of it would later be compared against the cold, official timeline Julian was compiling. I built a mosaic, their public narrative versus their private reality. Emotion underpinned every move. When I asked for help from former teammates, I didn't play the betrayed martyr. I played the precise professional asking for facts. When I comforted Maya over coffee, I didn't gloat. I let empathy disarm her. When I wrote to clients, my tone was warm and quietly authoritative, the tone of someone who knows her worth without shouting it. Each interaction was deliberate, but not desperate. I was teaching myself to move from hurt to strategy. Meanwhile, Damon swaggered on, convinced I was out of the picture. He posted photos of the new team, toasted the fresh vision, and smiled for the cameras. He didn't know Julian had sent the first legal notice. He didn't know I'd already spoken to key clients. He didn't know Maya had mentioned a specific internal email trail that tied him to the decision to remove my name from a major pitch. He thought his timing was perfect. He thought my anger would be a whisper. But power is less about who shouts the loudest and more about who waits with a plan. I waited. I let them feel comfortable in the fiction they'd created. I let them believe I'd been erased. Every night, I added another layer to the file. A printed email here, a voice memo there, a client testimonial I had coaxed into writing. The pile grew, and with it, my calm. Each piece of evidence made the future less a fantasy and more a contractually guaranteed reckoning. Then, one rain-soaked Thursday, Julian called. His voice was steady but quick. "We have all we need to file. There's more than just the clause. We have patterns of deliberate erasure." I closed my eyes and breathed in the storm. My palms were steady. My chest was full of a quiet, dangerous confidence. Because they had laughed at my clause. They had assumed I'd be broken. They didn't know that the clause was only the first line of the story I was about to write. And tomorrow, I would start the chapter that would make them listen. They walked into the courtroom thinking they'd already won. The gallery was full, cameras at the back, a smattering of reporters, a single empty chair where Damon once sat like a king. I felt the air press against my skin like the first cold of winter, and I smiled into it, small and patient. The morning began with Julian moving like a conductor. He didn't shout. He unfolded facts with the elegance of a surgeon. "Exhibit A," he said, and the room watched as my printed drafts, timestamps, and Slack threads scrolled across the screen. Each timestamp chimed like a small bell. There, then there, then there, before Damon's name ever appeared. The judge leaned forward. The gallery rustled. My pulse was steady. I did not rise. I watched them watch the paper trail of my life, the early morning edits, the midnight campaign pivots, the signatures that tied me to work they'd later stolen. I felt every humiliation fold into a kind of quiet power. Evidence is merciless when it's true. They tried the usual defenses, rebranding the removal as strategic, painting my redundancy as noble, even necessary. Damon's lawyer practiced sympathy and condescension in equal measure. But then a client took the stand. She did not speak with legalese. She spoke with memory. "Emma wrote the roadmap," she said plainly. When I read the new pitch, I recognized her voice. The courtroom inhaled. Damon's joy tightened. I let them flail while I listened to the slow collapse of their story. Julian had prepared for every dodge. He had coaxed testimonies from former teammates who'd feared Damon's wrath but could no longer stomach his lies. He had the internal emails where Damon congratulated Maya on work he'd instructed her to present. He had the board memos that framed restructuring as a rhetorical cloak. Each document folded Damon's smile into a smaller, meaner thing. Midday, Julian stood and delivered the quiet blow. Under the explicit language of Section 7, termination without cause, including restructuring and position redundancy, obligates full compensation for the remaining contract term. Vexler Media failed to honor that clause and willfully attempted to characterize it otherwise. The judge read the clause aloud, like a verdict pronounced before the verdict. For a moment, the world narrowed to the sound of his voice and the weight of that language. Then the cameras swarmed. Press conferences happened outside the courthouse while Julian filed motions that would ensure the damages weren't just symbolic. Clients who'd given Vexler glowing testimonials quietly retracted them. Vendors who owed the company favors started calling in debts. The boardroom that had once hummed with Damon's charm began to crack under questions from shareholders who suddenly preferred clarity to charisma. But the true art of revenge was not in the money alone, it was in the mirror. I had asked for payment, yes, but I also asked for accountability. Julian presented the public-facing timeline against the internal memos and emails, and the difference looked like theft in broad daylight. It wasn't only that they had fired me, it was that they had built a narrative out of my labor and sold it as theirs. That narrative unraveled thread by thread. When Maya testified, eyes wide, voice small, she confessed with the limp honesty of someone who'd been used as a prop. "I thought I was helping the team," she whispered. "I didn't know the extent." Her admission landed harder than any accusation from me could have. People don't only punish liars, they turn on the stagehands who let lies stand. By the end of the week, the legal judgment forced Vexler to pay a sizable settlement, enough to change my life and quiet the board's immediate worry. But the settlement was only the first strike. Several of Vexler's marquee clients, uneasy with the ethics exposed in open testimony, began to walk. Investors asked to audit internal practices. The press dissected every fresh vision post-Damon had ever made. Revenue projections faltered. The firm's brand equity, the soft currency Damon had trafficked in for years, bled away. I watched the headlines like a surgeon watches a wound close. There was a measured cruelty to watching someone's polished life start to show the rough edges. Damon's name attached to memos about reallocation, the photos where he'd toasted new talent, now captioned with questions. The board convened emergency meetings. Damon was asked to step down pending an internal review. He left the office for the last time not as a conqueror, but as a man who'd lost the map he'd once drawn. Throughout it all, I stayed composed. I didn't scream into microphones or trash his name on morning shows. I answered questions with the flat smile of someone who had already been vindicated on paper and in conscience. My fury was a quiet instrument, precise and honed. I took what was mine and I watched what followed. One evening, Lisa and I sat on a bench by the river where we'd toasted my despair months ago. The city lights shimmered. Somewhere, a late train sighed. "You did it," she said simply. They laughed, and you turned the joke into a checkmate. I looked at the skyline, the place where ambition meets the sky, and felt both the sting of the past and the cool certainty of the future. Money can't erase betrayal, but it buys options, the ability to rebuild on your own terms without dependence on someone who would erase you. The last image I carried from the trial was Damon's face the first time the media asked him not about vision, but ethics. That flicker, surprise, then panic, was almost beautiful in its honesty. He taught me how power looked when it was unchallenged. I had taught him how it looked when it was taken away. As the courtroom emptied and the cameras packed up, I felt a new weight settle over me. Not the heavy armor of revenge, but something lighter, a responsibility to myself. The storm had been cinematic, brutal, and deserved. But the end was not vindictiveness, it was a reclamation. I walked out into the afternoon sun with my head high. The clause that once felt like a joke had become my salvation. They had laughed. They had paid. What came next would be mine to write, with care, with fury, and with a clarity I'd earned the hard way. The office that once made my heart race now stood silent, stripped, cold, and hollow. Vexler Media was gone. The glass doors that once reflected ambition now carried a simple leased sign. The empire Damon built on my ideas had crumbled, and no one was left to defend it. I stood across the street with a cup of coffee in hand, watching the final moving truck pull away. I expected triumph, but what I felt was peace, deep, quiet, steady peace. Damon's fall wasn't explosive. It was slow, public, and poetic. The man who once charmed every investor couldn't charm his way out of audits, lawsuits, and headlines that used words like fraudulent, misconduct, and breach. The same people who had once cheered his name now whispered it like a warning. And Maya, the assistant who once smiled as she took my place, sent a message one night that simply read, "You were right." "I'm sorry." I didn't reply. Some apologies are too light to carry the weight of what they broke. I moved on quietly. I started consulting from a small studio downtown, sunlight on my desk, no corporate noise, no politics. Just me, my ideas, and the kind of clients who valued integrity over flash. I built contracts that protected creators the way mine had protected me. Every clause I wrote was a reminder of the day they laughed, and how laughter can turn into silence when the truth arrives with paperwork. Still, there were nights when I thought about everything, the betrayal, the lies, the disbelief in my own gut. I remembered how I'd once trusted too much, how I'd silenced my instincts to keep peace. That silence had cost me more than a job. But now, every morning I woke up knowing one thing: I'd never silence myself again. Months later, a journalist reached out. She was writing an article called "The Woman Who Outsmarted Corporate Greed." She wanted to tell my story. I agreed on one condition. It wasn't to be about revenge, but about resilience. About how destruction can be the start of something better. When the article went live, it ended with my quote, "Sometimes justice doesn't come with noise, it comes with calm." That line spread across the internet. People shared it, printed it, made it their screensaver. I got messages from women who'd been silenced, betrayed, or overlooked. They told me my story gave them courage to demand better. That was the real victory. A few months later, I ran into Damon at a business event. His suit was perfect, but his eyes weren't. He looked tired, older, uncertain, a man haunted by his own reflection. He stopped me and said, "Emma, I didn't mean for it to end like that." I smiled, not cruelly, just honestly. "You never mean for consequences to happen, Damon." "But they always do." Then I walked away. Because real power isn't about destroying someone. It's about not needing them to matter anymore. Outside, the city was alive and unapologetic. I looked up at the skyline that once represented everything I'd lost. Now it just looked like freedom. Because betrayal doesn't break you. It reveals you. And when you rebuild stronger, smarter, unshakable, that's the kind of wealth no one can steal. He laughed at my contract clause. But that clause made me rich, not just in money, but in peace, clarity, and power. He erased my name from the boardroom. So I built one where no one could erase me again. If you've ever been betrayed, if someone stole your work, your trust, your peace, tell me, did you burn for revenge or rise for yourself? Share your story below. Because sometimes, the scars we hide become the map someone else needs to find their strength. He stole my work. But I wrote the ending.